Hi, how are you doing today?
Hi, good. How are you, Kimberly?
Good, doing good. Chris, what sparked your interest in creating a series focused on high-stake Disney collectible auctions?
Well, my wife and I collect movie props, TV props, pop culture memorabilia. We've been to auctions. We've watched a lot of auctions online and participated in them. And the show was kind of an accidental pitch. My friend Brian Volkweis, who runs Nacelle, is a
Mhm.
huge collector of Star Trek props and memorabilia, and we honestly were just kind of nerding out about that one day about a year ago, and I said, someone should really make a show about this. Like, this process is so fascinating, and he was like, "Let's do it." And I was like, "What?" And he goes, "We can just make it." And so I go, "Okay." So I called Mike Van Eaton, who runs Van Eaton Galleries, who are
Mhm.
they do a lot of different types of auctions, but I would say they're probably really the premier Disney auction house. They've done, just amazing Disney auctions. I've gotten a lot of stuff there, and so I said, Mike, would you be okay if we wanted to like document this, like do a docuseries about this? And he says, Chris,
Mhm.
coincidentally, in a few months, we're putting up the largest single Disney collection in existence. And
Mhm.
he intimated to me that it was this guy who I knew of but didn't know who he
Mhm.
was. But I knew there was one guy who, in all the previous auctions, would just scoop up the majority of stuff and
Mhm.
like really big, big pieces. And
Mhm.
so I was aware that this person existed, but I didn't know who he was. So it just kind of added to the mystery and the intrigue, and that was it. It just all serendipitously worked together, and we were able to capture all of it, and it was really an incredible process. It turned out so much, beyond what my expectations and hopes were.
Can you share a memorable moment from up for the auction that truly captures the excitement and energy of these Disney collectible events?
Absolutely. I think for me, it was probably walking through the exhibit. For people who haven't seen the show, the Van Eatons rented out this old Bed Bath and Beyond, this empty department store, and they created this really great walkthrough where they kind of like placed everything in the land that it would be in Disneyland and created this really
Mhm.
wonderful walkthrough. And one of the days of the auction, my mom came to visit, and we just had this really beautiful, like, connective moment, very emotional, where my mom, it really kind of highlighted what the show is about because it brought back
Mhm.
all these memories, all these stories of, when she was like, when you were a little kid, I took you on Space Mountain and I was so scared I had to hide my eyes. And you were like, Mommy, stop, you're embarrassing me. Like this really sweet kid moment,
Mhm.
and she just thought that was so sweet, and all these wonderful moments that came flooding back of just walking through with my mom. And I really think that's kind of what the show is about. It is a
Mhm.
high stakes auction show. It is about people spending money on items, but at the core of it, it's really about the connection that we have to these items, the stories, the memories, the fact that there are these objects that are
Mhm.
tied to these incredible moments in our personal human timelines, and that like we can have this physical representation of those, is
Mhm.
really what it's about. So it doesn't matter if someone's spending six figures on something or $50 on something. What really matters is, like, what does that thing mean to you?
Mhm.
And that to me was probably the most special part of the show.
As an avid collector yourself, how has hosting the series influenced or expanded your own collection of Disney memorables?
I only got a couple things in the auction. They were very small things. There were a couple larger things that I was like, all right, I'll put in a bid. And I would put in a bid.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would find out that the pre bids, which happen online before the auction actually starts, blew way past where I was willing to go already. So I was like, okay, I'm out. But, the beautiful thing about these auctions is that I never am like, I never go, oh, I didn't get that thing. I always really feel like, we're in this community of collectors, so I know that someone else really wanted this thing a lot, and my hope and my belief is that they will care for it, because we're just kind of like temporary caretakers of these things. These things are really pieces of pop culture history, and so we're like these little personal museums that care for them and preserve them and collect them. And in Joel's case, whose collection it was, he rescued a lot of these pieces from like dumpsters, like from the brink of complete decay, and he
Mhm.
restored them and brought them back, and in some cases reanimated them, like in the case of the hitchhiking ghosts from the Haunted Mansion. And so,
Mhm.
I didn't so much grow my collection, but it really expanded my appreciation of like, oh, like my responsibility as a collector is to care for these things and to make sure that, when they move on, that they go to people who will also care for them.
Yes. Are there any surprising stories or histories behind certain Disney items that you discovered during the making of Up for Auction?
I did not know that one of the amazing things that Nacelle, the company who handled the physical production, is they
Mhm.
did the movies that made us and the toys that made us and behind the attraction, and so they are so good at kind of deep diving and telling these stories about history that you didn't know. And
Mhm.
the one thing that I had no idea about was that the movie Dumbo like really helped save Disney Studios.
Mhm.
Um, they had sort of, I believe they kind of fast tracked it to get it out sooner,
Mhm.
because maybe they were not making as much as people might have assumed they would be making, but Dumbo was a
Mhm.
huge hit and really helped the studio tremendously. And I didn't know that. So, I was really appreciative that just as a fan and a collector, that I was able to, learn stuff like that from the show. I thought I knew a lot about this stuff, but, there's always more to learn.
With the variety of collectors featured on the show, is there a particular story that stood out to you that has an ex standing is unexpected? Sorry.
I really have to go back to Joel and his collection, because what I did not expect, I just thought like, oh, this is a guy who's just acquired. Before I met him, before we did the show, I thought this is a guy who's just like acquiring as much stuff as possible. I had no idea what a fan he was of this
Mhm.
stuff and how meticulously he preserved and how beautifully he presented. He would build like custom stands for things that were within the theme of the ride. He would, there was a control panel from the Haunted Mansion, which is, an old control panel with lights on it that kind of gives you a map of the ride so that if
Mhm.
the ride breaks down anywhere, they can kind of tell where it is and how, and it would have the alert button that would say, that would tell people to please stay in their seats and whatever. And so he just had this old control panel and he built this gorgeous stand and put these little Haunted Mansion gargoyles on it. And he fixed the electronics. So when you push the buttons, it did all the sound effects and stuff. And to me, that was the most heartwarming because it felt like he cares about this stuff. He wants someone to have like a fully realized piece and not just, and if it was just the control panel not working in a box, someone would have bought it. I probably would have bought it, but I was so pleasantly surprised and amazed by the beauty of like how much care he put into bringing all these things back to life.